where lust for a whole life and nothing but less makes people jump out of a comfortable pond into an unknown ocean. Welcome to that journey between the East and the West. Who says rolling stones don't gather moss? Hello, everyone. I am Meenu Gupta, your host for the day, and I'm delighted to have you join me every week as amazing people share their incredible and inspiring life stories of straddling continents. Thank you. From Kolkata in the east to New York in the west, from the corridors of one of the leading management institutes in India to the corridors of the historical Vedanta Society in US, from the primary goal of becoming a pilot to finally becoming a monk, minister, and spiritual leader. Our guest for the day, dear listeners, has an appeal both for the East and for the West. He is known as one of the world's best lecturers of the Vedanta, and I'm delighted to host him for the wisdom section of our podcast series Between the East and the West because of the way he has sown Eastern and Western thoughts and philosophies in his speeches across the globe. So, Swami Sarvapriyananda, he's also been a inaugural fellow at the Harvard Divinity School, besides having engaged in dialogue with many eminent thinkers of our times. In this episode, we will go through the East and the West and beyond to a oneness which we all at times are aware of and sometimes not. So, Swamiji, a very warm welcome and thank you for sharing a bit of your time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And even though time is a manifestation of, I guess, humanity, because there's time, space, and causality, how did you become a monk? Do take us through the journey for the listeners to better understand and appreciate how it all happened.
Well, I grew up in a small city on the eastern coast of India, city which is very ancient actually, Bhubaneswar, the capital of the state of Orissa. But the city itself is very spiritual. There are many, many ancient temples which dot that. That place is basically a city of temples. It's only recently that it's become the capital of Orissa in the last century or so. So I grew up there, and my parents were very close to the Ramakrishna mission. The local Ramakrishna mission ashram was very close to our house. And my parents used to take me there. We grew up with books of Vivekananda in the house. I think I belong to probably the last generation in India before cable TV and certainly before the internet. So all we had were books, and I read a lot. So that's how I was introduced to spirituality, to Swami Vivekananda. And it made sense to me, even as a school kid. The books were telling me that God is real, that self-realization or God realization is a real possibility. And in fact, that is the goal of human life. And that attracted me. I thought that, if I go down the beaten path, I'll be like my parents or what I see, in my uncles and aunts, life like that. But here is Vivekananda talking about an extraordinarily different life, a life spent in the pursuit of the divine, the pursuit of God or of self-realization. So by the time I completed my education, I was sure that I would be a monk. Of course, I was very young, so I was also not totally confident. It seemed like a tremendous thing, much more adventurous than what I had ever done in my life up to that point. Then I took the plunge after completing my education. The day I finished my last assignment, I was doing an MBA at the Xavier Institute of Management in Bhubaneswar. The day I submitted my last assignment, the next day I left for the ashram. Ashram where I joined the Ramakrishna order is the Ramakrishna Mission Vidyapith in Deoghar. And this year they celebrated 100 years, their centenary. It's a beautiful ashram in what is now called Jharkhand. At that time, it was part of the United State of Bihar. Now it's in Jharkhand. Very beautiful place, a pilgrim town. Again, an ancient temple town. I think ancient temples are probably in my karma. So that's how I joined the Ramakrishna order, and I became a monk, and I haven't looked back ever since. That was in 1994. Yes.
Question: if you had feelings, so to say, all along while you as a soul were born in a place which helped you or inculcated that feeling, the education, and the books, why do management at all if you have to diverge, if you knew that you have to diverge?
Yes, so there is that's also part of my story of becoming a monk. Interestingly, I did management. I did that MBA degree to become a monk. The story is this: that when I was, I think, in high school, probably. No, I was in college. I was doing a degree in economics at the local college. So a senior monk came to the ashram, to the Ramakrishna ashram near our house. He had come from the main monastery at Belur Mutt, at the headquarters of the Ramakrishna order. I still remember I spoke with him, and he sort of noticed that this young boy might be interested in becoming a monk. And he asked me whether I wanted to become a monk. I said yes. I was a little shy about it. And then he said, how old are you? I told him, and he said, you are young yet. I think you should complete your education first and maybe earn some money, and then see when you're independent and earning money, with money in your hands, how does the mind behave? Does it still want to become a monk? If yes, then go ahead and become a monk, which are very wise words, actually, to finish your education, to stand on your own 2 feet, and then take a decision. So I started worrying about how do I earn a lot of money very fast so that I can, sort of check the box, tick the boxes. And I had, in those days, we had no idea at all about what MBA was all about. And somebody told me there's a thing called an MBA. If you do an MBA, you're going to get a job very fast and earn a lot of money. So I looked around, and there was this XIM, the Xavier Institute of Management, in our city itself. And I got into that. There used to be this entrance examination, CAT. I think it's still there in India. So the institute I got selected in was in that very city itself, the XIM in those days. And so I really entered the management world, not really aiming to be an MBA and a business executive, but just to get the experience of a job and get some money, and then quickly exit and become a monk, having done with it. And so that's what I did. I never really worked after finishing my education, but in between, when you do an MBA, there is a period of summer internship. So I did an internship with one of the leading companies in India at that time. They gave me a very nice allowance, which I thought that, okay, this is earning money. Done that. Been there, done that. I'm not going to get into a job. And the day it was all over, the last assignment submitted, I had went straight to the ashram and became a monk.
Ah,
So that's why I did an MBA.
yeah, you ticked off the box. It is said, I mean, it's very famously said also in Wikipedia, by the way, about you, that when you were asked in school, what would you like to do in the future? The first goal, primary goal mentioned was pilot, and secondary goal was to find God. So, my question, did you find God?
The pilot bit, you see, that's like a story which has taken on a life of its own. It's true that as a little boy, and like most little boys, I guess, I was really interested in aeroplanes. I was fascinated by aeroplanes, and I still love aeroplanes to the extent that, just looking at an aeroplane, I can tell you the model of the aircraft and its characteristics and stuff like that, even to some extent now too. But I never really, took any practical step towards being a pilot. It's just was something that fascinated me. And I mentioned it in an interview, and it's taken on a life of its own. People bring it up every now and then. Though I did get to fly a plane, that was right here in the United States, not in India. As a monk, just a few years ago, it's very easy to buy a flying lesson here in the United States. So some people had heard that story, and they said, "We're going to give you a treat, Swami. Come with us." And we went to a local airport, and they said, "We have bought you a flying lesson, so you get to fly a plane." And we went into that airport, and the funny part of the story is that was 9/11, not the 9/11, but the few years back, 9/11, that particular date. And there was a big poster in the airport which said, "Don't let your planes fall into the wrong hands." And when I walked into dressed like this, the person at the counter looked at me with a great deal of skepticism and even suspicion. And they asked me, "Do you even have a driver's license? Do you drive a car?" I said, "No, I don't." But then they were very nice. They did allow me to fly a plane. So that did happen. The other side of it, the search for God, it's a lifelong search, and there are nuances to it. But I can say this much. that every day of my life as a monk for the last 30 years, I feel has validated my decision to become a monk. That I feel this, that the search for God, whether you're a monk or not, the search for God, the search for spiritual realization is a true search, and it's one that you're bound to succeed in. You will get results sooner or later.
Wise words. Very nice. Then, interesting seeing your background. I also see that, but also in the Ramakrishna mission, I see that, and the other places, a lot of engineers and scientists, at some point, even from the best institutes in the world, suddenly drop everything and go there to adopt monkhood, so to say, to pursue up the path. Why is, I know this is your journey, but seeing the trend, I don't know, have you seen that also in the West?
True. In the Ramakrishna order, we have some exceptional people, as you said, scientists, philosophers, engineers, and doctors, and many of them. Some of my friends are among the most brilliant people I've ever met inside or outside the monastery. And they're also very ordinary people like me, and there are many others also. I think what ties us all together, brilliant or more ordinary, is this common spiritual quest that is there ultimately a point or a purpose to life? Is there some transcendent reality beyond death? Are we just bundles of flesh and blood destined to be born yesterday and die tomorrow? Or is there really, the Atman, the spirit, whatever you call it? So this quest, it's Vivekananda sort of for our modern age, he typified this, he exemplified it. He went around famously in late 19th century, in the last decade, in the late 1880s, early 1880s, he went around asking people in Calcutta, have you seen God? There's well-known spiritual teachers at that time. And he found the answer with Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who said, yes, I have seen God and you can too. So this quest, I think we all have this quest, and that's what ties us together as monks of the order. And we find the ideals set forth by Sri Ramakrishna, Ma Sharada, Vivekananda, the ideals of the Ramakrishna mission, which is Atmano Mokshartham Jagat Hitayacha, for your own liberation and for the welfare of the world. We find it a wonderful philosophy of life, and that's what we try to embody in our lives. In the West, yes, those who are interested in the spiritual quest in the West, we find among them some of them. I know some of the monks here, Western monks, some of them are very highly qualified academically, people who have achieved a lot in their lives, and then they become monks. It helps to the extent that once one has done something in this world, one begins to get the idea that there is something more than this world. There's something higher, something only the infinite can satisfy you, and what the world offers is always finite.
Good. Now, that sort of makes sense in a way. I mean, though it's taken from another angle, it's like what I would tell when I was consulting the international companies. I would tell them you can know the temperature of water by, of course, dabbling in it. You can go near the ocean, touch, see a little bit. You can only know completely when you dive into it. So you can have your phase of touching and dabbling and so on, and then you come to a next phase. Okay, I go into it. So by going into the first area of, okay, I do this and I do that, my mind is taking me there. Okay, finally I do that. Now I've dabbled and I've done. Now I dive completely. So from that angle, it also makes sense. Just curiosity. Your birth name is different from the one which is given to you at initiation. Why is that generally done?
Yes, this is standard in monasticism, especially in Hinduism. So the idea of becoming a monk is your past life is over. Your pre-monastic life is a different life, and now a new life, a spiritual life begins for you. So in our order, in the Ramakrishna order, we have a period of preparation for about 9 to 10 years, 9 years basically, where you are a novice and you go through a period of training. And then when the novice is ready, and we call a novice a brahmachari, the brahmachari is ready at the end of this 9 years, he can now become a sannyasi, a monk. And when he does so, the name is changed. So we do not use our pre-monastic names. We go by the new name which is given to us by the guru, by the head of the order who gives us sannyasa, the vows of monasticism. So I got the name Sarvapriyananda, and it goes Swami Sarvapriyananda. That's the name now. So the basic thing is you are getting a fresh start, a life completely dedicated to spirituality. You technically, as far as the past life is concerned, you're supposed to be dead. you know we ritualistically perform what is called atma shraddha, the ceremony one performs, a Hindu performs for dead ancestors. The same thing is performed for yourself by yourself when you become a monk, so that ritualistically it's driven into you and to society that you are dead, the old person is dead, and this is a new person. It's psychologically very powerful, and to help that process you are given a spiritual name, a monastic name.
And quite a few Western people also then go through the process, and they also then learn all those years in Sanskrit.
Yes, there's a period of rigorous training, 2 years of rigorous training in our main monastery, which is opposite Calcutta, on the bank of the Ganga. What it's called the Hooghly there. And this monastery is called Belur Mutt. So there is a training center for brahmacharis, novices in that monastery. All those who are novices, brahmacharis in the Ramakrishna order all across the world, in all our centers, which are more than 250 centers now, in all those centers, they come here, they come to that monastery, Belur Mutt, for 2 years of rigorous training. That includes Sanskrit, that includes studies of the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, a variety of religious texts, training in a general awareness of the different teachings of the different religions of the world, philosophy, and plus, of course, training in everything from meditation to puja to manual work. So that's 2 years at the main monastery. And the remaining period of training is done in the other ashrams, wherever one might join the order as a monk. So a total of 9 years of training. A good part of it is, yes, Sanskrit and study of the scriptures.
And do householders also sometimes join, as in they leave everything, or what happens?
So if you leave everything, then you become a monk. But otherwise, one can remain as a householder devotee. And there are millions and millions of householder devotees. What they usually do is that they take a diksha, mantra initiation from the guru, could be the president of the Ramakrishna Math or one of the vice presidents. And they give spiritual initiation, which is a technique of meditation, a mantra for repetition, and some suggestions for spiritual practice. And they try to cultivate devotion. They try to cultivate one-pointedness through meditation, study of the scriptures, and selfless service in their lives. This is basically what we monks do, and householders can do the same thing in their, in their families and in their communities, in their professions. The idea being that spiritual life is for everybody. It's not that you have to become a monk for becoming enlightened. That's not compulsory. One can become a monk and exclusively pursue a spiritual life, but that's not possible for the vast majority of humanity. So spirituality is for everybody. I remember when I was a kid and visiting the ashram near our house, once I saw this young novice working in the temple, and I was too shy to go up to the senior monks. So I just went up to him and said, "You're very lucky that you have become a monk." And he told me something I've remembered ever since. He said, "No, the one who finds God is lucky. It's not that just becoming a monk. It's a great thing to become a monk, but the goal is to find God. The goal is to become enlightened, whether you're a monk or you are a family person or you are just out there in the world, living by yourself, holding onto a job, and just living life in the world. Spirituality, the pursuit of God realization, is for everybody."
No, that was very wisely said, what you said, the gentleman who said that. Very wise words, I must say. Because I remember many years back when my guide turned to him and said, I want to go up to the mountains now. And he turned around and said, you are on the path. And if you're on the path, you become, the more you, if you are able to practice it in the muck of life, then it shows your mettle, so to say. That was one thought he had and passed it on to me. Gave it a thought, okay, that's a lot. But then it's not to exclusion. What I understand a monk's life would allow him or her to process everything in exclusion rather than be with all distractions and process. What is your thought on that?
That's true. There is a value to an exclusive pursuit of a spiritual life. So that's what a monk's life is. You set aside everything that is not directly connected with your goal of enlightenment. So, job, relationships, possessions, extraneous activities and engagements. So, you simplify life down to a bare minimum and subsist on whatever you get in an ashram or a monastery and devote your life exclusively to a life of study, meditation, prayer and worship and service. The four yogas, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, meditation, Dhyana, and Karma Yoga. So there is a great advantage to that. However, what you just said, that's very important. Spiritual life is not just a life of retirement and seclusion. In fact, all those who have tried, almost all of those who have tried a life of extreme seclusion, going up into the mountains, remaining in a cave, I've met many such people. They would all tell you the same thing, that whatever they achieve there can also be achieved in the midst of life. And in fact, one should try to maintain that same composure, that same spiritual search in the midst of life. There's a reason why the Bhagavad Gita was taught on the battlefield by Krishna to Arjuna. It was not taught in a mountaintop or in a cave or in an ashram. It was taught in the middle of a battlefield. War is basically the most horrible thing that one can see in life. And if you can be spiritual in the midst of war, that shows that we can all be spiritual. Nobody is too busy or nobody is in too much trouble to start spiritual life. So yes, God with eyes closed and God with eyes open. Both are possible and both should be there.
Nice line. How does it feel? I didn't have that question before, but now seeing you there, I suddenly popped that question. How does it feel being in the place where Swami Vivekananda was? It's historic just to even think about it, literally walking in the footsteps of Swami Vivekananda.
I think Vivekananda is just the person who would typify the spirit of the podcast, between East and West. He was probably the first cosmopolitan Indian, a globetrotter, the first of many who would come after him. So just imagine this young man who was barely 30, setting out from India to come and represent his country and his religion in the World Parliament of Religions in this completely unknown country in those days, traveling across more than halfway across the world, representing his religion and his philosophy to a new land, to new people. It's incredible. So, Sister Nivedita, she writes in the introduction to the complete works of Swami Vivekananda that when Vivekananda stood up to speak at the World Parliament of Religions, and by the way, that was also 9/11, 11th September, 1893. So when he stood up to speak, she writes that at that point, the East and the West met. In front of him was this new civilization of the West with all its power, its dynamism, its spirit of inquiry, this scientific spirit and so on and so forth. And behind him was 5,000 years of patient development of spirituality and religion, the entire Indian heritage. And at that point, these two met when Vivekananda stood up to speak. She writes eloquently that not only the East and the West met there, but also the past and the future met at that moment. The entire cumulative past of India's past and then the future of humanity from that point onwards. So right after the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago, Vivekananda came to New York. New Yorkers then as now were very enterprising. They got hold of this young, amazing teacher and said, you must teach here. And this is where he founded his first formal organization. That was the Vedanta Society of New York. He was not here in this particular building where I am now. When Vivekananda was here, the Vedanta Society of New York functioned from different rented locations across Manhattan, across the city. We know where those locations were, but we got this building in 1920. Vivekananda, of course, passed away in 1902. So, but the Vedanta Society has been located here in this building for more than 100 years now, since 1920 onwards. But yes, you are right. This is the legacy of Vivekananda. This is an ashram founded by Swami Vivekananda. And there's a very interesting story behind it. One day he came home to his host the house where he was staying, and the lady of the house, he told her, "Today I have met the greatest temptation of my life." And she smiled and said, "Oh, who's the lucky woman?" And he laughed and said, "Oh, it's not a lady, it's not a woman, it's organization." So he said, "I have this temptation to found this organization, which will carry forward, the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, the teachings of Vedanta, and the work that he has this idea of propagating in the East and the West." So the beginning of that was the Vedanta Society of New York. Of course, the monastery of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna already existed when Vivekananda came from India to the West, but this idea of a formal organization, this really he got here, and the Vedanta Society was the first fruit of that idea.
It's actually very beautiful. I mean, it's a privilege, I'm sure, and that feeling itself is beyond. I had not even thought of asking you because suddenly I remembered. Okay, it was exactly there where the whole process started of setting up an organization. It must be a tremendous feeling. It's a legacy you are carrying on. A lot of people, even now, equate West with science and the East with spirituality. I differ sometimes on that, but I would like to have your knowledgeable opinion. You've gone through both, so what is your opinion?
Yes, it's not easy to categorize, especially these days. It's not really always a good idea to be essentialist. But yes, Vivekananda did remark that these two ideas of civilizations, the ancient Indian Vedic civilization and the ancient Greek civilization, they had their unique characteristics. And those have been carried on to, say, modern India in the East and the modern West, that is Europe and America. Again, one shouldn't reduce it to essentials, but that West is scientific, quote unquote, or materialistic, and India is spiritual. A lot of Westerners who go off in search of spirituality, backpacking in India, especially these days, they come back and say how materialistic India is, And there are so many people here in USA, and I'm sure in Europe also, who are deeply, deeply spiritual, who are very interested in spiritual life. But the point is that Vivekananda wanted this synthesis of the best that was in the East and the West, and he believed that this synthesis is possible and indeed desirable to have a free, democratic society, liberal, open, with a deeply imbued with a scientific spirit, and yet deeply spiritual. So the combination of these two, he wanted it, this combination synthesis for India and for the West, for the whole world. In fact, you will be scientific and you will be spiritual. You will be liberal and open and yet rooted. I can put it in new term. There's a new term called cosmopolitanism. So cosmopolitanism is like the great cities of our time. Something like New York or London or Paris, where a huge number of world cultures come together and commingle. And so there are people who speak so many different languages. And there is food from all the continents of the world, the different cultures, dress, music. And it's not that people exist in silos or ghettos. They mix with each other. They learn from each other. They intermarry. And a new kind of culture also develops with inputs from world culture. So this is cosmopolitanism. And human beings also should be cosmopolitan. I think that was Swami Vivekananda's idea of the future of humanity, where the East and the West would meet in each of us. And you would be scientific and spiritual. You would be committed to your individual spiritual search and committed to the welfare of society and the world. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it actually takes me to some more questions, a bit different from what I had thought of asking, but this is a thread. Then, when you said the word cosmopolitanism, would that be somehow equated to global citizenship? Many people nowadays say,
That's a good question. I was going to lead up to that and I forgot. So, cosmopolitanism, yes, but Vivekananda is what you would describe as a rooted cosmopolitan. There's a kind of cosmopolitan which is rootless. So you are where you are, and that's it. You're not particularly identified or rooted in any particular culture or religion or community. But Vivekananda was very firmly rooted in India. He had his feet firmly planted in India. He was every inch an Indian and very proud of being an Indian, very proud of being a Hindu, and yet very liberal, very open. In fact, it was his understanding of what Indian is, his understanding of what Hinduism is, which enabled him to be so liberal, open, and always willing to learn and develop and grow. So, yes, cosmopolitanism, but rooted cosmopolitanism. I think that's the healthy way to go. There can be a kind of global citizenship, which is a rootless kind of globalism. Pico Iyer, the travel writer, he wrote this beautiful essay for Time magazine many, many years ago. He said that where is home? I remember he writes that if you look at me, I look like an Indian, but I've never spent any part of my life in India. I was educated in England, where I was always an outsider. I worked, most of my work life was in New York. I think he worked for Time Life magazine, probably. And then I settled down and lived in Japan. So that's where he lives now. I live in Japan, and I know I'll never be ever be accepted as a Japanese, as part of this culture. So where is home for me? And then he goes on, and he goes on to say that there are larger and larger numbers of people like this now in the world. Earlier, large numbers of people used to move between countries, maybe as refugees, maybe as invading armies or colonizers. But now there's a new kind of global citizen. He says, in this day, it is very common to be born in one place, to be educated in another place, to work in a third place, and to marry and settle down and have a family in a fourth place, maybe retire to a fifth place. It is the food that we eat, the people we live with, the institutions where we learn and work. They're all cosmopolitan, spread across the world. And large numbers of people are like this now, which was never there in the history of humanity earlier. So where is home for such people? That was his question. And his conclusion also was very poignant. He said, for such people, you'll have to find home within yourself. You must be rooted into something. So that's where I take the cue, that you must be rooted into something transcendent, spiritual within yourself. You cannot look like people, our ancestors before us, to the village or to the community around us, or to a joint family to give us a sense of home. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. And they are, whatever is left is also fast disappearing.
That's interesting, because that was actually going to be my next question to you. Exactly that. Where is home for you?
Yes, that's a good question. I have, after reading Pico Iyer's article, I also thought that. And yes, home is always within. You can call it in the Atman, in God, in the spirit. And so I am more or less comfortable wherever I am, as long as I'm centered in that reality within. So I just think about it. I grew up in this little city, which is not so little anymore. It's a very vibrant and wonderful city, Bhubaneswar. I was a monk in an ashram in the eastern part of India, and in the main monastery on the bank of the Ganga. I have lived in a tiny hut, 10,000 feet in Gangotri, spending time in meditation, begging for my food, living months together in solitude. The hut didn't have any furniture, no question of electricity, nothing. So I lived like that. And now I'm here. I've lived in Hollywood. I have lived here in Manhattan. I have lived in Boston and at Harvard University. And these experiences are not atypical. There are many, many people in the world who have this extraordinarily wide range of. I mean, just take the immigrant experience of people from India or China or other places staying in America or Europe. Their entire lives changed dramatically. So this is a new phenomenon, and if my experience is helpful to anybody, I feel comfortable when I'm centered in the spirit, that I know I am this one consciousness which shines through this particular body and mind and through all persons. We are all united or one in that one consciousness. Wherever we are, in whatever conditions we are home. We are home. Our home is a spiritual home.
Super, because the question would ideally, then my question would ideally have been, instead of where is home, what is home? That would ideally should have been my question. And you've put it very, very beautifully. I agree with you.
I mean, I can go into Vedanta here. When you say where is home, it's a space question. Is it in India? Is it in Europe? Or is it in America? Then when is home? When am I back home? That's a time question. So, a person who's traveling on business from airport to airport would ask this question: when am I coming back home? When is an important question. Or what is home? Is it a particular city or a family? Is it a particular place or a job? What is home? And Vedanta would say all of this, when and where and what, they are all appearances in one inner reality, which Vedanta calls the Atman, our real nature, which is existence, consciousness, place, time, space, and object. Where, when, and what, time, space, and object, they appear and disappear in consciousness. And when you know that you are that consciousness, then you are perfectly centered. So Vedanta gives you a sense of home wherever you are, whenever you are, and in whatever circumstance you are. You feel you are comfortable.
So that's the feeling and the experience of home. Even if many people define it even if they might define it as a where, some might define it in many ways in their parlance, in their language, or in their way of saying. So essentially, it would boil down, if we take away all the wrappings, to the feeling and the experience of that consciousness. They may not realize it.
Yes, but it won't happen automatically. It takes cultivation. Automatically, we regard ourselves as the default setting is as a person. I am this person. But once you regard yourself as a person, you are caught up in the personal. And so the personal and the interpersonal, the world and society and job and your aspirations. So the whole tangle of what we call samsara comes up. This witness consciousness, which we talk about in Atman, in Vedanta, is impersonal. And to realize ourselves as this impersonal reality, it will take some kind of spiritual practice, devotional, meditative, action, philosophical inquiry. Something is required to take the jump from the personal to the impersonal. One of the things, where is home? This question also points to one more important question in spiritual life, the question of solitude versus in society. One of the forms of this question we talked about at the beginning of the interview, this podcast, the monastic life and householder life, solitude versus community or society. And when you are centered as this witness consciousness, as what Vedanta says is our real nature, then you're comfortable in solitude and you're comfortable in company also, whether it is in your community or at job. You're comfortable in a very busy, high pressure situation, and you're comfortable in a retreat or an ashram or in a mountaintop. That is the ideal which we are aiming towards. Some people can be very comfortable. They yearn for being solitary. They want to go away from it all, which is good, but it's not the final, it's not the ultimate outcome which we're looking for. Some people cannot do without company. They always want to be entertained. They always want to be around people. And that's not such a healthy state of affairs. If I don't want to be alone, it just means that I don't like my own company. So if I don't like my own company, why should anybody else like my company? Desirable state is to be comfortable in solitude and to be quite comfortable and happy in the midst of people.
So, to wrap up that question, if cosmopolitanism, again, if that is equated to global citizen, so you are that, in that oneness, in that feeling of being centered, you are home everywhere.
Yes, that's important. Otherwise, there might be a feeling of alienation, of being lonely in the midst of a crowd, of being of not mattering at all to anywhere, anything, or anybody. That kind of feeling might come. So, being centered in the divine, one can deal easily with the human.
So, and then another mundane question, a notch below. How was your experience in the Harvard Divinity School? And you mentioned the Hollywood Temple. You were there for a while, right? So, how was that experience?
That was wonderful. That the opportunity to study at Harvard just came up. I never expected it to go back to college or go back to school, as they say here in the United States, at this age. But and I was hesitant when the opportunity first came up. But this very noted academician superstar in her own right, Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak, who is a emeritus professor here at Columbia. She said, "Why do you want to pass up this amazing opportunity? Look at me." I mean, she is now 80. She said, "I'm still studying." She's still studying and teaching. "You are a baby compared to me. You should definitely go and join this course at Harvard." I'm glad I took her advice, and I had a really great experience. It's a wonderful place to study. I love universities and libraries, so I had the time of my life there. I don't know how much studying I did, but it's a very rich intellectual life. So something or the other which is of your interest is always happening there in campus and outside of campus. So I attended so many talks and seminars and met so many eminent people. I would just go in and sit in the classes of some of the best teachers in the subjects at Harvard. Just to, it's always a pleasure to listen to an expert talking about his or her subject, whatever the subject is. Somebody who's passionate and loves that subject. It's wonderful to listen to them and learn something from them. So that was a wonderful experience. One thing I'll point out though, this speaks to your earlier question about the is there really an essential difference between the East and the West? Vivekananda thought there was. Each has its distinct characteristics. The difference is maybe less now. The West has become very multicultural. India has become very cosmopolitan and open. So less of a difference. However, I did notice this. Now I'm speaking entirely in the context of religion. This was in the Divinity School. So in the context of religious studies. What I noticed here in the West, and Vivekananda noticed it very clearly more than 100 years ago. He said, in the West, it's all about society, especially here in the United States. Here, he says, in the West, in America, if I have to teach religion, I have to show people how it can make for a better society. And in India, even if you have to do social reform, you have to do it through religion. So here, society, our life in this world seems to be the be all and end all of everything. Whereas in India, religion and spirituality are much more central to the life of the people. So what I noticed was, so at the Divinity School, all these smart young people, they were there to study religion, theology, philosophy. But the concern always was, how can religion, say Christianity, how can it help us in LGBTQ plus? How can it help us in combating global warming? How can it help us in combating racism? How can it help us in solving the immigration problem? So these are issues of the day, and these are all social issues. And how can religion help in changing that? Good. There is nothing wrong in that. That's all wonderful. But what strikes me as a monk, the whole goal, the whole purpose of my existence and my life is the search for God, the search for enlightenment. And I regard that search for God, the search for enlightenment, as the very core of religion. What is the core of religion? Is it social reform? Is it politics? Is it economics? Is it global warming? Is that the core of religion? Or is spirituality the core of religion? I would say without any doubt, any shred of doubt, that spirituality is the core of religion. What happens is, once you stress the applications, the social applications of religion to the exclusion of the spiritual side, what happens is after some time, in religion also you lose sight of what this was originally meant for. And then spirituality also, even if you talk about spirituality, spirituality also becomes LGBTQ plus, it becomes fighting against global warming, it becomes fighting for the rights of immigrants, fighting against racism, all very good causes. But again, this is not the core of religion. In India, we have the opposite problem. There is any amount of religion, any amount of spirituality also, but often it degenerates into kind of ritualism, and it's often divorced from society. So whereas here the idea is to apply religion and to change and improve society, where in India, we're very aware of the spiritual side of religion, but the social impact is often ignored. And Vivekananda wanted a harmony of both. That, yes, spirituality is the core of religion. God exists. Self-realization, enlightenment is true, and you must pursue it. That is actually the ultimate goal of human life, the purpose of human life, the very meaning of human life. At the same time, society exists, and it can definitely be better than what it is now. And as spiritual people, you cannot ignore society. Private spirituality is not very spiritual. One must bring the knowledge and the insights of spirituality into society and to benefit and to improve society. So this combination is important. I was trying to point out the a kind of essential difference in the two approaches in the East, I mean in India and here in the West. But that has changed. In India also, a lot of spiritual people, religious people are very socially conscious now. And here in the West, I saw among the young students at Harvard Divinity School, very clear social consciousness, but also many of them were genuine spiritual seekers also. So it's there in both places. Yes, but your original question was my experience at in Hollywood, at Harvard. I sometimes joke and say that I've stayed in these three very interesting places in the United States in the last few years. Hollywood, where the goal seems to be glamour. If it's the film industry and you have really made it, if you're close to the film industry, you've done something or achieved something in the film industry, so that's the criterion of success in Hollywood. Here in New York is Wall Street. Here is very clearly a place where money is the criterion of success. So if you are a player on Wall Street, then you are at the elite of New York society. That seems to be the goal. I'm oversimplifying, of course, and at Harvard, intellectual life is the criterion of success. Are you a tenured professor at Harvard? Are your books prescribed for study in the syllabus, or have you got a Nobel Prize? That's the top of the food chain. Now, what I noticed was whether it is glamour in Hollywood, whether it's money here in Wall Street, whether it is intellectual life at Harvard, the people who are truly fulfilled and happy are those who are in some way spiritual. Some way spiritual. It's not that cannot be happy in Hollywood or Wall Street or at Harvard. You can be. There are deeply fulfilled people living in these places, and all of them have a spiritual life, an inner spiritual life. And that's what I noticed. And the contrast is also there. The opposite is also true. Very successful people, famous actors in Hollywood, unhappy. Extremely rich people here, billionaires. There's a place here which is called Billionaires Row. Like the whole row, if you're a millionaire, you can't live there. You have to be a billionaire. Extremely rich people, very unhappy. At Harvard University, I've seen, or in Boston in general, Nobel Prize winners and at the top of the academic food chain, extremely unhappy. So neither glamour nor money nor academic laurels will ensure fulfillment and happiness, but spirituality does. Sri Ramakrishna put it very beautifully. He said, if you line up a series of zeros, you still get zero. But if you have a one, then every zero gets value. If you have the one, just the one, you have got something. And if you add a zero to it, it makes it 10 or 100 or 1,000. So the one, he didn't explain what the one is, but the one is spirituality. Call it God realization, self-realization, whatever it is. So that was my observation.
It's interesting because your answers, they throw up four words: God, spirituality, society, and religion. Now, where is God equal to spirituality, or spirituality leading to God? Let me put it this way. And then, what is spirituality? Is it the seeking is it a path of seeking? Is that spirituality? And then, when we look at these four words, what is God in the West and what is God here? And I'll add a fifth word to this entire chain: faith. So we have God, spirituality, religion, society, and faith.
Let me, instead of trying to give a very systematic answer to it, let me just jump into the middle of that. There can be two kinds of spirituality. Spirituality, I would consider as the core of religion. Religion is a vast, big, ancient phenomenon. It has ritualistic aspects, mythological aspects, social aspects, politics. So many things are involved in religion. It has many, many dimensions. But at the heart of religion, I would say, is spirituality. Every religion at its core is spirituality. So what is this spirituality? This spirituality is a path to God realization. Spirituality is path. It's a way of life. It's practices. It's something that takes you somewhere. And that somewhere, you can call it God, or you can call it the self with a capital S. Why I'm saying that is, religion and spirituality can be of different kinds. There is the God kind of religion or spirituality. And that's the most common kind of religion that people understand here in the West, a God seeking religion, a God centered religion. So Islam and Christianity and Judaism, they're all about God. There is a omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent creator of this world who is all good and whom we must love, worship. So that's one kind of religion, one kind of spirituality. It's true. But as we well know in India, religion and spirituality can be of an entirely different kind. There can be religions which are not God centered. For example, famously Buddhism. Buddhism doesn't believe in God or a search for God. For example, Jainism. Jainism is not about God. So in India, we have from the most ancient times broadly two kinds of spiritual approach. One is God centered. The other one, I won't say it's self-centered, that sounds very bad. A self-enquiry, a God-seeking religion and a self-enquiry based religion. A search for God and a search for who am I, our real nature of the self. Buddhism, Jainism, within Hinduism, you have both kinds. So Shaivism, Shaktaism, the worship of Shiva or Devi or Vishnu, these are all God-centered approaches within Hinduism. But also there is a self-enquiry approach in Hinduism, the Sankhya approach, the yoga approach, meditation and philosophy. So these two kinds of spirituality, both are possible. Um, Now, faith, the word you used, which is the word used for religion here in the United States. Now, faith is a particular kind of religion. The faith is always associated with a God centered religion. Faith means believing in something. See, a God centered religion, when I'm searching for God, does God exist? Can I experience God? It always starts on and proceeds with faith. It must start with belief, because God is not something that we commonly experience. We are taught it, the holy books speak about it, our religions tell us about it, and you have to believe in it, you have to have faith in it. So much so, the word for religion in the US is now faith. Which faith do you belong to? Whereas if you take up something like Buddhism, it's not really a faith in that sense. It's more a process of inquiry and meditation and ethics, you know, psychology and meditation and ethical practices. There are faith elements which have come up over the centuries. So broadly, these two approaches. Let me put them together, the words which we used. There is a reality called God, which is worth looking for, searching for, and attaining. It can be found and attained. But that you can do as a search for God, or you can do it as a search for who am I, into inquiring within yourself. And that is easily understandable, because the very structure of our experience, any experience that we have in life, is subject object. I am there, and this whole world and other people are what I experience. So, subject and object. When you inquire into what's the reality of the object, that's God. When you inquire into what's the reality within the subject, that is Atman, or the real self. So, it stands to reason that there can be two kinds of spirituality: outward directed spirituality towards God, and an inward inquiry towards the self. This is the core of religion. So, spirituality is the core of religion. One kind of religion is faith. And the purpose of human life is to seek this God realization or self realization. So that's what brings all these words together. Sri Ramakrishna famously, he said all the religions are different paths to God realization. His famous teaching of Jato Mat Tato Path, as many faiths, so many paths, as many religions, so many paths. And therefore, it follows there's no need to quarrel between the religions. One huge issue from the most ancient times has been the quarrels, the fights between religions. And Sri Ramakrishna's teaching was the harmony of religions, that your purpose is common. The paths we take are different. Each religion is unique, definitely, and that's wonderful. That's what makes it all, to bring in a new word, cosmopolitan. If they were all the same, it wouldn't be cosmopolitan. The religions of the world, of different civilizations, are different, and they have their uniqueness, which is what makes it so rich and so wonderful. But there is absolutely no need to fight fight between the religions. This hatred between the religions, it has been a cause of so much bloodshed and continues to be, amazingly and horrifyingly, in the 21st century. So these are different paths. Once we have the path mental, there's no need to quarrel between paths. The paths are leading us to the same goal. If we have that paradigm of religion, then the very rationale for interreligious conflict will disappear.
When we say dual and non-dual, so when we say subject and object, we are talking of duality. And from duality, we are going towards non duality. We are proceeding onwards. When in different religions, also as faith, you said, is a form of religion in the West, it is treated as so. We are separating the subject from the object. That's duality. And when we are talking of oneness, that is non duality. It's all in. So I will have to pop the question which I wanted to do at the end, but I do it now before the other one because it is following that now. From non duality to, or duality to non duality and oneness, a big question, so to say. Why have it all? Why would that one consciousness break up into smithereens of multiplicity to hold this stage of Maya, to, to have a dream, multiple dreams in multiple layers, evoke time, evoke spatiality? Why do that? Why set up a stage? Why one is was consciousness getting bored? I'll put it in normal language. Was consciousness getting bored?
So why at all is there a universe? If there is one, why is there many right now? Is consciousness getting bored? Is that non-dual reality, Atman, Brahman, getting bored? Why is it appearing in this way? So the answer to both of your questions is, the first question is that why does it do this? The answer actually is why not? And the second question is, was it getting bored? The answer is actually yes. One of the theories of creation in Vedanta is the Leela theory, play theory. This is basically the play of consciousness, or the play of, you can call it the play of God, or you can call it the play of consciousness. Now, think about what you just asked. Why does the one appear as the many? Why does consciousness appear as time, space, and this universe of many, many beings? Suppose it didn't. One could ask the question, this non-dual consciousness, it seems perfectly useless. Why doesn't it do something? The moment it does something, quote unquote does, you will need multiplicity. You will need variation. So the one, remaining the one, appearing as a universe of diversity is non-duality. Notice that the stress is on non-duality. That means the duality word is already there. You cannot deny duality because that's how our experience starts. As I said, all experience is subject and object. And already we have duality there. We see other people, other places. We even see our own bodies as somehow other than us. Because here is when I say my body. And even when I'm looking at myself, it's still an object. The body I can see, smell, taste, touch. The body is an object to all the senses. So there is a duality within the person itself. Experience requires duality. There's always a subject and an object. So the world of duality is given. Now, non-duality is remarkable because what it claims is that what appears to us as a world of difference and duality is in reality. So this makes a difference between reality and appearance. The dualistic philosophy will tell us it appears to be dualistic, yes, and that's reality. It is dualistic. There is, you are separate, the world is separate from you, and there is a separate God apart from you. This is the dualistic philosophy. The non-dualistic philosophy, the non-dualistic viewpoint says what appears to be dualistic, separate, a universe, you, and God, all separate from each other, all connected, are actually underlying, there is in reality, they are one reality. So duality in our experience, and as a matter of fact, non-duality. This comes from the question, what is the relationship between the subject and the object? When we say all experience is subject and object, you cannot deny all experience is subject and object. But non-dual philosophy asks the question, what is the relationship between subject and object? Are they separate things which come into contact as it seems to be in common sense? Or is it the subject alone which is appearing as its object? Is it the subject? Are you appearing as your own universe? Is it possible that what you are experiencing is yourself? And a good example for that sounds crazy, but a good example for that is our own dreams. In our dreams, we seem to be experiencing a world, we seem to be experiencing other people, interacting with people, things are happening in our dreams, good and bad. And when we wake up, we realize suddenly all of what I saw in the dream was nothing other than me. I, the dreaming mind. I created everything in my mind and imagined it all. That's what a dream is. So it is the same mind appearing as subject and object in the dream and a universe of multiplicity in the dream universe. What non-duality claims is that's exactly what is going on now. There is one underlying being, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda, which is, so to say, dreaming this universe, which is appearing as its own universe. You, the subject, are appearing as your own object. In fact, whatever we see, whoever we see, are nothing other than ourselves. But that's the real self, not the person. Persons are many. Time and space and all, the differences are there in this universe. But the real self is the ground of this universe. And that's a non-dual self. Whatever appears to be a second thing is actually not a second thing. Is that thing alone appearing to be a second to itself? Is you alone appearing to be your world? So that's the difference between duality and non-duality.
When we say form, formless, qualities, if we go beyond that and there's one consciousness, east and west is a matter of geography and thought. It is also said, love is the fabric of the universe. It is from which everything arose, and it is what it goes back to. Then what is that? What is your thought on that?
That love is also the same existence, consciousness, bliss. The word bliss is the Sanskrit ananda. In the Vaishnava Vedanta philosophy, so Vedanta is a very big house, a big mansion with many, many rooms. One of the schools of Vedanta is non-dual Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. But there are many other schools of Vedanta. The Vaishnava Vedanta schools would say that it is that ananda, the bliss aspect of Brahman, the absolute, which becomes love in our world, which is expressed as love in the world. Vivekananda, he gives a very stirring picture, a unique vision of love in the world. He says, this is all that is going on in life. When you look around, the parents sacrificing themselves, working day and night for their children, that is love. When you see it could be in the tiniest bird, which is pouring out its life to gather food and feed the chicks in the nest. If you see the flowers blooming in the field, if you see the green grass, all of this tremendous movement of life all around you, human life, human society, also animal life, plant life, down to the tiniest microbes. He says, this is that cosmic love, this tremendous outpouring, this tremendous movement, uh, this tremendous seeking. This is basically what we experience as love. But his view is a very, very vast cosmic way of looking at this love. We are surrounded by it all the time. From that initial impulse of love, of joy, of bliss, we have come and we persist in it. Our whole human, effort in society, in civilization, in religion, yes, even in politics and war, everywhere, even in the worst of things, is that at the behind it is that one original impulse which sets everything into motion. And that's the cosmic love, or the source of what we call love.
Yeah, very, very nicely put.
So that's all very nice, very philosophical. But what do you do? And Vivekananda gives us this wonderful philosophy of life. He says, eternal love and service free. What would be the Vedantic philosophy of life? What's the best possible life that we can imagine as human beings? The highest, noblest, the most fulfilling life. He says, eternal love and service free, unconditional love. So it's not a bartering in love, that you love me and I love you. Otherwise, not like that. I love unconditionally. It doesn't matter who you are, how you react to me, what you do to me. Those equations don't enter. I know that my best existence is when I love unconditionally. That's one. And the other side of the coin is what he said, service free. Vivekananda said, service free. Love must be expressed in action, must be expressed in sacrifice, actually doing things from moment to moment, day to day, pouring yourself out for the sake of the one you love, that you love all. So pouring your life out for the service of the all. This is the best philosophy of life that we can have. There is nothing, no philosophy of life, no spirituality, which in practical terms exceeds this or is greater than this.
No, that's beautiful, because actually, then my thought would be, when the act of service is with love, there is no sacrifice, because that's the way of being. Sacrifice would be if you give up something, but you're not giving up because you are that. It's not that you wanted to do something else and then you did that, but you are being that, expressing the greatness of yourself, and that is who you are, and that's an act of service.
Correct. You are actually being really true to yourself. You're true to your real self.
Then it is not an act of sacrifice at all, actually. But then I remember I've been practicing Hatha Yoga since many years in the late 90s and early 2000s when I used to travel in Europe and ask the hotels to give me a white sheet to put on the floor because I would practice my Hatha Yoga there. They all used to wonder in those times. Even when I used to take time off from my meetings and do my regular meditation in the evenings. Now, since then, yoga has done a very quick journey across the globe. And it is becoming what I would say a popular sport. At times, I'm shocked by the lack of understanding of what yoga is, but then I realize, okay, they don't know. It is not their fault either. In an interview with the Times I read, you once stated that doing yoga the right way can change the way you live, work, and love. I found it a very beautiful statement. So do tell us, what is the right way? And how would you define yoga, which has unfortunately been deformed by many and for many across the world?
Yes, this is a phenomenon which I feel is unavoidable. When you, in this world of ours, when you give it out openly to everyone, everywhere, people will take that system of knowledge in their own way and adapt it in their own way. So sometimes distorted forms may come up. You have things like beer yoga and goat yoga, the whatnot. So these are signs of American innovativeness. People will come up with anything, often to make a quick buck, or often just because they think it's a nice idea and they'll do something with it. I think the thing to do is not to restrict yoga, but to set standards. If we say that there is a genuine form of yoga or genuine forms of yoga, to promote that, which is being done, of course. And the right way, well, in 2013, I think there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about Swami Vivekananda, the man who brought yoga to the West. But the article went on to point out that what he meant by yoga was not necessarily the physical side of yoga, the hatha yoga side. What he meant by yoga was, of course, the yoga of service to others, karma yoga, the yoga of meditation, raja yoga, the yoga of love, bhakti yoga, and the yoga of knowledge, jnana yoga. So these are all paths to the manifestation of the divinity within us. When we practice that, we are doing yoga for the purpose it was meant for originally. I read somewhere that the pioneers in hatha yoga in the United States, and it's actually through the United States, it spread all over the world. Krishnamacharya, Pattabhi Joyce, then BKS Iyengar, all those big names in Hatha Yoga. And they all came from the same place, actually, Mysore in India. They all felt that physical side of yoga, the asanas and the pranayama, these are most attractive to Westerners because of the immediate benefits they give, physical benefits. But they all hoped that the spiritual side of yoga would become popular eventually. I think it was Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, maybe an apocryphal story, but people asked him in India, what is it that you are teaching the Westerners, the transcendental meditation, that if you meditate, your stress will be less, your immune system will be better, you won't get these wrinkles, you will look young. He said that I give them what they want in the hope that they will want what I want to give them, which is nicely put. I give them what they want, youth and flexibility and whatnot, in the hope that one day they'll come to understand that the real benefit of yoga is spiritual. And then they will start wanting that. Wanting the real spiritual benefit of yoga is the right way to practice yoga.
And the spiritual way of yoga
is service, is devotion, is focus and inquiry, self-inquiry into who am I, that is Jnana Yoga, devotion to God, Bhakti Yoga, focus, daily meditation, Dhyana Yoga, Raja Yoga, and a life dedicated to the welfare of other beings, that is Karma Yoga.
So that would be yoga in total. So that's now what I understand, because when one speaks to journals, then there's one line which is taken and it sounded very beautiful, but then now it makes sense when you say it can change the way you live, work, and love. When people come to you with questions, whether it be in the East or the West, matter of geography and different way of putting it, sometimes do you feel that why are they asking me this? I wish they would ask me that. Would there be that question that you wish they asked you instead of the many banal questions that might come to you.
Yes. And that question is the fundamental question which we have been asking since ancient times. What is reality? What is my purpose in life? How do I find fulfillment? So this is the core of the spiritual question. And this is what I wish we would ask. But even what we might characterize as a banal question, my children don't listen to me, or I have a relationship problem, or I'm struggling in life with depression. All of these questions are basically forms of that central question. We are always asking, how do I find fulfillment? How do I really find deep peace? How do I find meaning in life? And what's real here? Is the world real? Is God real? So these are deep metaphysical questions, which are deep spiritual questions. It's helpful if we ask them in the spiritual form, not so helpful if we ask them in their more worldly manifestation. I've lost somebody who is very beloved to me, somebody who suddenly died, suppose we say that. And that's very shocking and that's very important to me. But what we are in depth asking is this life all that there is? That person who is gone, is that person really gone forever? What's the mystery of life and death? That deep spiritual question is what we are asking. We just put it in the form of, I miss this person. I wish he or she were still alive or with me. We put it in that form. But these questions, any deeply heartfelt question, even at first glance, it might appear to be worldly, mundane, but it has its root in some spiritual or yearning.
Got the point. Essentially, when one sees the fruit or one sees a question, one has to realize the root from where it is coming, the tree or the plant from where it is coming. So it's just all generally the same. Very, very nicely put. What would be a parting message?
Ask these questions. What is the purpose of life? How can I be deeply peaceful and fulfilled? And pursue it. It's very important to pursue it. We sometimes do ask these questions and we get some answer here and there, and then we get swept away by the day-to-day happenings in the world and we don't pursue it. So pursue it. Have a regular spiritual practice of meditation, daily meditation, regular spiritual practice of study, scriptures, whatever you consider as the scriptures of your religion or your whatever pulls you, whatever inspires you, a regular study and a regular some place of devotion in whichever form of God attracts you, in whichever religion. Somewhere you bow down, somewhere you surrender, somewhere you can pray in the most private recesses of your heart, somewhere you can cry and unburden yourself, a place of devotion and a place of doing good to society or to people around you, not transactional. I'm doing something because I get something back from it. No, it could be volunteering, it could be helping out somebody, it could be just be giving money to a worthwhile cause. So these aspects in life: study, meditate, love, serve.
Thank you. That was actually wonderful. It was much more than I thought it would be, even more beautiful. And the most beautiful part is most of the time, whatever I had in mind to ask, you were already mentioning that, you were already leading it to the next question before I could even pop the question. That was beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the series Between the East and the West. Do subscribe to the channels mentioned on the site in case, of course, you liked what you heard. I am Meenu Gupta, the host of the series, and I'll be looking forward to your comments. We love feedback. Thank you once again. Namaste and bye-bye.